I'd love to start with the question, why is the supermarket a great place to engage people about sustainability?
I think that the coolest thing about the grocery industry is that, everybody has to eat. There's so many things in our world where you might choose to take part in a certain part of retail or commerce, but food's sort of the great equalizer, if you will. Everybody's got to find their food somewhere. And so the great thing about grocery stores is that people are super familiar with them. Most people have been in a grocery store or something similar to a grocery store. And so when you talk about shelves and a checkout line and a bag to put your things in, or who is helping you, everybody can relate to that. So it makes for actually really good storytelling and metaphors because everyone has had that experience of being able to walk in and purchase food.
Tell me about some of those metaphors that you have in your head to kind of bring these topics to life for people.
Yeah, there's quite a few metaphors that I love to think about. If we think about sort of think about a grocery store almost like as your home. So let's just pretend like a grocery store was our house and we're walking into it. And the first thing that we do is when we walk into our house, we leave the front door open. Doesn't matter what the temperature is, whether it's a hot day or a cold day, the door opens for you and it stays open because it might take you a minute to walk in the door, which is very similar when you walk into a grocery store. The automatic doors open and they sort of stay open longer than they may need to. And then you walk into the store, for example, and imagine if you left your refrigerator and freezer doors, in your home open, and how strange that would be, right? But we walk into grocery stores sort of expecting that that's actually the case, or even an oven, to be honest, right? So you can go to the wing bar and, get some hot chicken and it's nice and warm for you, or, you walk over to the dairy case and pick up a gallon of milk and it's nice and cold, but you may or may not have to open up a door in order to access it, or grabbing a head of lettuce or a package of chicken. And we would never do that in our own homes. We would never just leave the refrigerator and freezer or oven open in case, we just wanted to grab something. But we have normalized that in our grocery stores. And so some of the inefficiency that we actually see in our operations, especially as it relates to climate, comes from some of those things that we would never do in our own home, but we expect when we walk into a grocery store. And actually, another example of that is that when, if you think about what we do with the waste that we create in our business or in our homes, we never think about where that waste goes. So if you have to think about, all right, instead of it being hauled away and sort of, I'll put it out on the curb and someone will pick it up for me and take it away to some, magical land. If somebody said, okay, you have to start burying your garbage in your own backyard, you might really think twice about what's in that garbage and how much there is in it and what you could do to minimize it. And so there's these different ways you can start to visualize, I think, for people. Okay, wait a second. There's some very strange practices we have where if the ownership was on us, if it were our refrigerator door, if it were our door to our house, if it was our backyard, we should really change some of the way that we see our food system and the way we manage it.
Yeah. Let's talk for a minute about food waste, because I know you're very passionate about it. And it seems like we've hit sort of a consumer tipping point on this topic. People are understanding food waste a bit better, and they really don't want to see food waste in their grocery stores or in places where they shop. And so just curious sort of what your policy is on food waste, what you're doing behind the scenes, and what you want people to know about both in the store and at home.
Yeah, there's a lot of information that still needs to be shared. And I'm so glad you're exactly right that people are becoming much more aware of some of the inefficiencies in the food system and how that creates food waste. And that awareness is certainly helping, but there's so much more work to do. So the first thing to know is actually about 30 to 40% of the food in the US actually is wasted. And the majority, this is what's crazy, the majority of the food that's wasted in the US food system is actually in people's homes, where we are purchasing items and, not consuming them within whatever time we expected or while the food is still good. And then it's going in the waste stream. And I think one of the reasons that people have a misperception, though, that a lot of that waste is happening in grocery stores. And granted, we definitely have waste in grocery stores, and we're working to address that. But the reason it seems different is because in a grocery store, you see the waste in mass, right? You see all of it in sort of one place. And so it seems like a high volume. But if you think about it in these terms, that we have, in Albertsons, we have about 35 million people in the US shopping our stores every single week. And so when you think about the food waste generated by 35 million consumers and their families, and how much they're unable to consume from what they've purchased, the volume is actually far greater than what we actually have in 2,300 grocery stores. And so that's where the power of the opportunity is not only for us to fix the waste that we have as much as possible in the system, but to help educate those 35 million consumers, and hopefully many more who would consider shopping our stores, to figure out how can they reduce their own food waste. And so first we have to look at ourselves. What can we do? And so we do things like, for example, put in AI-based systems that help us order better, figure out what's the right quantity of product to have in our stores that we can actually sell, but still gives you the freshness and the choice that you want as a consumer. How we rotate the product, how we manage the product, how we refrigerate the product, or when it should be in ambient temperatures. So we have many different activities and processes we're constantly trying to improve. And then one of the big things that we've really been pushing on is to say, okay, even if a product for one reason or another can't be sold in our stores, is it still good to eat? And in many cases it is. And so how do we then take the food that maybe is no longer sellable, but is still extremely edible, and make sure it gets to people who may not be fortunate enough to be able to buy all their groceries and may need support of a local food bank, for example, and making sure that that food that is still edible is getting to folks who need it. And then for sure, one of the powerful things about food waste that I think a lot of people are unaware of, you hear so many people talk about carbon, which is obviously, traps heat in our atmosphere and is part of the reason that we're seeing our climate change. What many people don't know, though, is that for food waste, for example, when it goes to landfill, it actually creates methane. And methane is literally tens of times more powerful at trapping heat in the atmosphere than carbon. And so there is a special need for people to say, not only am I going to minimize food waste, but when I have it, what can I do to keep it out of landfill and find its best possible and highest use? So first, that would be humans, for example, but then it would be, and for example, if you can't sell it, to donate it, make sure it gets into a mouth of someone who needs it. And then if you can't do those, then let's turn it into compost. Let's turn it into animal feed. Let's help it sort of rejuvenate our food system. And then, keeping as much of it out of landfill as possible is really the ultimate goal.
Tell me about your partnership with Uber, because it's kind of an unlikely partnership and also relates to this whole question of food waste.
Yeah, it's really wonderful to see how many different companies are getting interested in this topic. And again, I think it's partially because food and food waste are so relatable as something that people literally see in their daily lives that can be addressed. And so what we see is that companies sort of unrelated to the food industry really want to help figure out how they can be involved in solving that problem. And so Uber, as an example, actually donated money, and it's not just the money, it's actually driver time. That's how the money is manifesting itself, to help get the food that we need to donate to the people that actually need it. So one of the biggest gaps that we find is that, everything about food donation really relies on volunteers, right? And volunteers are volunteering their time and their energy and their schedule. And just like things come up for people who are, working and getting paid, things come up for volunteers as well and volunteer programs. And so being able to pick up that food reliably is one of the biggest issues that we have. 2,300 stores, rural and urban locations full of traffic and busy people. And so what Uber is doing is they're helping us bridge that gap. They're helping us find basically transportation for the food to get to our donation partners. So in many cases, in fact, I can't name a case where this isn't true, where our donation partners desperately need the food that we want to donate, but it's the transportation of getting it from our stores to those locations that's the biggest challenge. And so Uber's offered to help us fill that gap. And so we've actually done a pilot program with them in several of our stores. And now we're trying to expand it to other places in the US, where we can help just get that good food into the mouths of people who would love to have it. There really are some amazing partnerships happening out in the world. And we're doing work, for example, with Johns Hopkins University, and trying to look into donation practices and food waste practices, and what are the barriers for grocery store workers or for donation partners in getting that food? Because I think historically, people felt strongly that they wanted that food to go, to feed people. But there's so many things we have to worry about in grocery stores every day, and that you want us to worry about, right? Everything from food safety, giving you good service, making sure we're in stock, making sure that we're giving you all the variety and freshness that you're looking for, and trying to make sure that the food we can't sell gets to exactly where we want it to. There's just a lot of competing priorities, but it's not because there isn't the desire. And so then it's figuring out, what are those barriers? Is it transportation? Is it willingness to accept certain items? Is it ability to be able to know what is donatable versus what isn't, and giving people sort of their power back, to be able to fix all of those problems. We find there's a lot of partners out there that really want to work with us on it. And it's actually one of the things I'm most proud of, is that we as a company are showing interest and willingness, and I would say an innovative and design mindset, that we're not just going to try and do it the way everyone else is doing it. We're going to see if we can figure out new ways of navigating.
Yeah, well, and it addresses two of your key sort of priorities, right? Addressing climate impact and food insecurity. So it's kind of a win-win on that front.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
How do you think about bringing sustainability to the consumer at the point of purchase? How important is it that they understand these concepts you've talked about, how most of our food is wasted at home, right? And understanding the impact of that, but also understanding sort of your commitment to sustainability. How important is that at the point of sale, and what has really sort of driven results for you there?
Yeah, I think, the hard part in some ways about this work is that not everyone is aligned, right, in our nation, right, or globally, that this is an issue. And what we want to do is make sure that we're meeting consumers wherever they are, right? So our job is to make sure that you have the ability to choose what you want to buy, the kind of item that you want, and that you can believe in the company that's selling it. And so that ability to have choice is really, really important to us. Now, obviously, our value system is that there is opportunity, and that we need to be addressing issues like climate, like hunger, like plastic and packaging. And just back, to this idea of, what would you do in your own home? If that apple isn't absolutely perfect, do you throw it away? Or do you cut out the bruise, right? Do you leave your refrigerator door open, just in case you want to grab something? Are you throwing something away that maybe has value? And trying to get consumers to think about those value systems as they make their own purchasing decisions. But again, giving them the freedom of choice. So it's not our job to tell them what to value. It's our job to make sure that the things they value are available to them. And then I think there's a lot of power in storytelling, because the truth is, I haven't found a human yet who wants somebody else to go hungry. And so I think when we bring these things we're working on forward, it's really important to speak to the humanness of them, that your abundance, is a wonderful thing, but someone else may not be experiencing that abundance. and how can we be working together to donate food and, try and reduce the amount of plastic and packaging that we use to hopefully, I'm a mom, I would love to leave the planet in a better place, than it was given to me. And, right now we're not on track to do that. So I think we all have to play our part in making that happen. I think too, in terms of storytelling, the visualization of things really starts to matter. So, one of the things, for example, we hear a lot about in our stores is, the plastic bags that we use at our front ends in certain states. And there's a lot of regulation going on in that space, both in the last few years and upcoming. And, my view on that is I would love to get rid of single-use plastic bags. Unfortunately, there's a cost associated with that, and the costs in a grocery business end up getting translated into food costs, right? I mean, what's the cost of the items that you're putting in your basket? And so when I think actually about plastic bags at the front end, which are certainly, the ones we put your groceries in before you leave the store, there's certainly an opportunity. But what I look at is, but what about all of the items in the bag? And how much plastic and packaging do they have? Because it far exceeds the bag itself. And so the work that I think we need to do as a company is help the companies that supply us reduce their plastic and packaging footprint and really push further and further upstream, because we can solve for the bags, but you're still going to have boxes and bags you have to carry home, and minimizing that footprint is actually more important in terms of volume than what will ever put your groceries in.
Right. What are some things that you think might surprise customers that are happening behind the scenes at your stores?
I think they might be surprised at how much pushing we do, not just to improve ourselves. We certainly look in the mirror first and see what we can do, but how many things we're actually doing to engage so many other companies and organizations in the improvements we're trying to make, right? So that may be partnerships with universities, or working with the Department of Energy, or partnering with Uber, for example, on the food delivery, or even working to try and push for consumers and even our own industry and food donation partners to understand food code dating, for example. So food code dating is a topic that I'm deeply passionate about, because I think people misconceive what food code dating, and so think of this as some people might call it an expiration date, right? So it's best by, best if used by, freeze by, all these different nomenclatures that are used in our business to indicate actually freshness. It's not really to indicate food safety. There's very select cases where it can be about food safety. That might be, for example, baby formula is one where the date is extremely important, because the chemicals actually in baby formula can change. And because of the sensitive systems of infants, we want to make sure that, they're not getting exposed to, the wrong mix of those chemicals. But when we think about, the date that is on your yogurt, for example, or on your cereal box or on canned goods, it doesn't mean that that food is no longer edible as of that date. It means that someone has determined that maybe that's peak freshness, or may just be sort of a standardized date that the rest of the individuals or companies manufacturing similar items use. And so the best guidance I can give to consumers, and is one that I use at home, is, use the sniff test, use the taste test. I'm embarrassed to say that I have months old yogurt sitting in my fridge, and I used some the other day, and it tasted exactly the same as it does to me when I buy it brand new, but it was several months old. And there's just so much product that we throw away as both an industry and as consumers, even though it's still perfectly safe and delicious to eat.
Yeah, that's a great point. Are there cost savings that people can come across by being more sustainable? And or is sustainability and your sustainability strategy a business opportunity for Albertsons?
I think this is such an incredible point. I actually don't come from a sustainability background. I'm deeply passionate about it, but my background is all about business improvement and transformational change and change management. And so, I really think about all of the things that we do in our recipe for change, which is what we call our sustainability strategy, through that lens. So if you think about plastics and packaging, for example, if I reduce the amount of plastics and packaging that's in an item, it actually reduces the amount of cost for that item. If I, for example, find a more efficient way of producing food, it reduces the amount of cost associated with that food production. If I reduce the amount of energy that I use in our stores, our energy bill goes down. If we have less maintenance on our refrigeration systems, which are actually one of our largest sources of emissions, and that's true just of the grocery industry in general, that reduces our maintenance costs. If I have less food waste that I send to composting, for example, because I've donated more of it, it actually is better for our bottom line. So there's all of these examples where this is good for business. In fact, we would do these things for our business regardless of whether they were better for the planet or our communities. But what a wonderful thing that they are better for both. And the heart of our company is really about taking care of our communities and our customers and just doing the right thing.
Yeah, I love that your title is not just Chief Sustainability Officer, but Chief Transformation Officer. So what is sort of the significance of the duality of that title?
Well, the significance is sort of twofold. It's, first of all, two slightly different areas of focus. So the sustainability side is really all about our recipe for change, which focuses on 4 key areas. Well, there's many areas we have to care about, but 4 where we try to show leadership. So that's all about climate action. So that's energy and emissions, waste reduction and circularity. So that's food waste and plastics and packaging, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And that's not just our associates, but also our suppliers and our customers. And then community stewardship. And that's really about helping with hunger in our communities. So those are our 4 areas there. And so that's the sustainability side. The transformation side has to do with all of those things and transforming actually our frontline culture, because at Albertsons companies, we have almost 300,000 frontline workers. We have around 275 to 290,000 at any given time working in our stores, right? Slicing the meat and, checking you out at the front end with your groceries and, baking the bread and doing all these different activities. And what we need to make sure is that those people feel welcome and included and connected to each other, to their supervisors, to the work that they do, to feeding people. And when I think about feeling connected, what makes me feel connected, it's actually when you can feel that there's a higher purpose behind what you're doing, that you're not just scanning groceries at the front end, that you're helping to make sure that someone actually has gotten the food home to their family, or that if you're the person who's stocking the shelf, that if you have to pull product because there's a requirement that you pull the product by those food code dates, that it's not just going to landfill, that it's actually going and being donated because it's still perfectly edible. I think there's a connection between what we do in sustainability and how connected people feel to their place of work. And so we actually believe we can truly transform our culture by increasing the connection that people feel between each other and between our customers, and retain our workforce better by doing that.
I've heard that a lot, especially in the food waste category, that when a company adopts, an aggressive food waste strategy it helps morale because people feel bad about going to throw this stuff out. And then, you just spoke about your employees, but speak about sort of the shifting customer expectations. What are you seeing in terms of how the customer has shifted, across your portfolio? Because you have many different stores and types of stores within your portfolio, but what are you seeing in terms of customer expectations around sustainability?
Customer expectations around sustainability just vary so tremendously around the US. And I think that's one of the challenges that we have to constantly be dealing with is sort of meeting people with the value system that they're bringing with them when they walk into our stores. So the power of choice. But what we definitely see is that many consumers are increasingly conscious of where their food is coming from, the type of plastic and packaging it's in, what are our practices for donating food or managing the amount of food waste that we have, and that they're bringing those value systems to their purchasing decisions. So, for example, products that actually have a favorable or more favorable impact on the environment are actually do better and grow faster than brands that don't. And I think consumer packaged goods companies, those are our vendors. So, think of the PepsiCos and the, Mondelez and, the General Mills of the world, all of these different brands that are out in the world, they are seeing the value of bringing products to market that meet that need, that meet that value system, because they're seeing, especially younger generations, look for those types of features in the products that they buy. So, I think it's incredibly, it's one thing you can either sort of lead the market to where you want it to go, or you can allow the market to help lead you where you should go. The example that I always give is the soda aisle, actually. So carbonated soft drinks, right? 10, 15 years ago, those were full of really just soft drinks with a very small portion of them dedicated to sparkling water, for example. But as consumers changed their buying habits, as they changed their value systems and what they wanted to purchase, you'll notice now as you walk down those aisles that actually there's, in some cases, dozens of sparkling water flavors. A much larger portion of that aisle is now dedicated to water. That is both helping to put products out that help lead consumers there, but then following the consumer demand that's saying, we want more of that stuff that has less sugar, for example, than we do of the maybe more processed products. And so there's some really interesting lessons to be learned, I think, in products like that and where consumers are going.
What was a recent learning moment that you've had that may have changed your approach to your job?
Well, in the last couple of weeks, I got to go see the output of a research project that we've done with Johns Hopkins and the Maryland Institute of the College of Arts. And I had always known that there was a huge connection between sustainability and transforming culture and frontline engagement. But I think it became even more evident to me after seeing the findings. We had several of the employees, so these are our store level employees who participated in this and hadn't really previously done a lot of food donation, not because they didn't want to, they wanted to, but I think just with all of the other responsibilities of their job and not having some clarity on exactly how they were supposed to do it, just hadn't done it to the extent that they, would have wanted. And several of them in this meeting said that in their 25, 35, 40 years of working with the company, that they had never felt more connected in the company and more passionate than they were after they participated in these food donation workshops and had seen the lines at food banks, for example, and seen the type of food that gets wasted, not only in grocery stores, but in people's homes, and sort of bringing that to life. So these are people who had worked decades in our industry, and hearing them say that this was the unlock, this was the thing that felt most like it tugged at their heart and made them excited to come to work every day. I think I knew it, but it made me even more dedicated to wanting to help our 2,300 stores and our 275,000 employees really find a way to be able to engage in reducing food waste and our entire recipe for change, because I do think it's in people's hearts to want to do something for a greater purpose. And I think that there's really meaningful ways we can bring that to life in operations.
Is that a story that you're trying to tell for your customers as well?
Absolutely. I mean, I want our customers to know it, not just because I want them to know us as a brand that makes these kinds of leadership commitments and is, truly trying to innovate, but also so that they can take some of those same learnings and incorporate it into their own lives. I think, we would be embarrassed a little bit if we went through our own trash and saw what, we throw away. I think we would be a little embarrassed, or actually maybe proud if we could reduce our energy bills, right? I think we would be happy if we didn't spend as much money on gasoline, for example. And so I think there's all of these ways that the things that we're trying to do as a company can actually not only make people want to shop in our stores, but can help them think about maybe things that they can be doing as individuals, because it's the power of the, millions of people that shop in our stores that can make an impact in addition to the work that we're doing as a company.
You obviously mentioned a number of innovations, right, around using AI to deal with food waste and partnerships with, unconventional partners like Uber. What are some of the things you're most excited about in your role that you feel could make the biggest impact?
I think one of the things that I'm most excited about in my role is that, we're a big enough company that while we can't fix everything ourselves, we can bring the right players together to start addressing things that are beyond our walls. So an example, right, is, when you think about growing produce, right, there's, waste that happens on the farms. There's waste that happens in the picking process and the packing process and the shipping process. And it hasn't even gotten to us yet, right? And then there's waste that happens in our system, and then there's waste that happens for consumers. And while we can't solve for all of that, because we're the commercial side of that, we can bring many of those players together to try and say, how could we be partnering together to figure out how we can actually reduce waste in a more holistic or system-wide sense. So I'm really excited about that. And I'm excited about that actually on the hunger side as well. There's so many things that we do and others do to make sure that we're getting food to people who need it. But, if I eat breakfast, I still want lunch. If I eat lunch, I still want dinner. And it's not even want, it's need, right? And so we're feeding that need, which is great. And we want to be able to do that because we want that food to go to people who need it. But that doesn't actually solve the root cause of it. We need to figure out what's causing hunger in different communities and work, again, not by ourselves, but with all of the partners that we can bring together to help solve that. So the causes of hunger in Dallas are different than Seattle, different than Boston, different than Chicago. And just, putting food in mouths doesn't solve for that. We need to get into those communities and figure out, is it a job issue? Is it a transportation issue? Is it a daycare issue? And it's not so that we can, wear capes and solve it all. It's who do we need to bring to the table, no pun intended, and sort of shape that conversation and drive it forward. Because the one thing I can tell you is that we are seen as an authority in food. We are seen as someone who provides that. And so if we can provide it in a more systemic way by helping more people have access to it, that's a pretty powerful part of the job.
Who are you working with on the AI side for food waste?
It's a company called Afresh.
Okay.
They're have you heard of them
before?
No. They're based in San Francisco, and they're a very cool company. So basically what they do is we use their system to put in, we started it in produce, and it takes into account, here's how much inventory you have of all these different items. Here's your historical sales. Here's what's coming up. Therefore, we believe this is how much you need, and how long those products last. And then as you continue to take inventory and like it sees what you're selling through the front end, and what, shipments are coming in and things like that, it will it self-adjusts to say, you need less this time around. And so now we're actually rolling it out to our meat departments. And so the idea is like center store, this idea has been around for a long time, right? Like it's perpetual inventory. I've got 10 boxes of Cheerios on the shelf. I sell 3. I need to bring in 3 more to backfill. Like that's easy. But In fresh, it's not the same because it only lasts a few days and you have to rotate it and you have to factor in what's in your back room, and you have, you know, a couple days to sell through your inventory, not weeks. So it's a really, really different, it's much more complex. But I think we're the first grocery retailer to use them. All of our stores use fresh.